Jazakallah khair. Brilliant point. Yeah. There's no more messages of.
Also, if we see around us, there are so many bad things going on, and there are so many beautiful things in Islam. So, even it's a basic humanity that if we have something good with us, we should share it with anyone who doesn't know about it.
Yeah, very good point. As human beings, we incline towards doing good. We want good for others, generally speaking. Right? So if we know the truth and we have this blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Islam, which tells us why we exist in this world and everything. And there's many people out there lost completely. They don't know what to do. Like I tell you guys, honestly, when you guys get involved in that, when you start talking to people, you start to realize how lost people are, how difficult their lives are. Yeah, trials and tribulations, every human will go through. That's the nature of this world. That's why Allah created us in this world. Allah tells us this in Surah Mulk. He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds. But they don't have the thing that can, really help them and support them through this life and deal with the trials and tribulations. They don't have this. We have this. So we should have this concern towards other human beings. We should share with them what we know. And we do that anyway. Who watches football? World Cup last month, yeah? So when your team was winning, what were you doing the next day at school or work? Weren't you talking about your team and how well they did and how well your favorite player did and all of this? We share things that we love, naturally. So if we love Islam, we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, shouldn't we then share this truth with them as well? Absolutely. Anything else? Yeah.
So and that's because we hope good and forbid people from evil.
Yes.
I think in that ayah is also it was to tell for the good and also calling away from the evil.
Yeah, the condition for being the best of nations, according to the ayah, is that you enjoy the good and you forbid the evil. And what is this goodness? You look at the tafsir on this goodness, the scholars have mentioned it's the whole of Islam, many of them. It's essentially giving Islam to people.
It's further, actually.
Yeah. There's a discussion whether it's communal obligation or an individual obligation, but the way I want you to see it today, brothers, is don't think about, and sisters, don't think about it as whether it's from a legal standpoint. I want you to see it as, once we appreciate how great the reward is of doing this work, you should think about how can I get involved so I can get some of this reward. Right? Yes, brother.
Also, we can look at different angles there. Like, if you do not do dawah, the consequences of that. The evil is spreading so fast in the society. So, if we do not actively do dawah and call people towards goodness, then our next generations will definitely be
Absolutely
affected.
Yes. It's either you're giving dawah or you're receiving dawah.
Yeah.
That's it. You're in either one of the two states. Unless you lock yourself in a cell somewhere and just live in a closed room, you're going to be either giving da'wah or receiving da'wah. You're either giving information or receiving information, right? And like you said, the next generations, things aren't getting better, they just seem to be getting worse. So it's a big responsibility. It's very, very important. Another thing I want us to think about is that the stories of the prophets in the Quran. When you read the stories of the prophets, what do we read about? What does Allah talk about?
All of them did dawah.
Dawah. That was the main thing. You read about Ibrahim, Musa, Noah, alayhi salam. The most we hear about them is about their dawah. Noah alayhi salam called his people, how he called his people by privately, publicly, night, day, every way, shape, or form. Musa alayhi salam, when we read about Musa, what do we hear about? Predominantly, it's his dawah to Fir'aun. Right? All the prophets. And if you go, again, you do a scan of the Quran, one could argue that at least a third of the Quran is the stories of the prophets. Right? And the stories of the prophets are fundamentally about dawah. Right? When you read the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, do we get the details of how he prayed or how he fasted? No. But do we get different events or incidences where he was giving da'wah, when he spoke to his father, when he spoke to his people, when he broke the idol? Right? This was his da'wah. So the Quran is teaching us lessons. Allah is teaching us lessons through the stories. Right? And when you read the stories, most of the stories are about da'wah. So in effect, what we could say is that at least a third of the Quran is directly dealing with the da'wah and teaching us about the da'wah through the examples of the prophets. And if it's teaching us, it's something we have to implement. Right? It's not that we learn about the da'wah, we read about the da'wah, a third of the Quran, and we don't give any da'wah. And if we want to connect with that part of the Quran, that third of the Quran, we have to experience some of the da'wah for ourselves. Right? Otherwise, it won't be real for us. You know, Nuh alayhi salam, people sticking their fingers in their ears, calling him a mad person. We read it, but if we really want to connect with this and understand this, you have to go out and give da'wah. And feel that you're not going to get rejected like that today, in most places. The worst that's going to happen is people are just going to smirk, ignore you, walk away. But even if you experience that much, you experience the feelings that come with it, you live that, then you'll be able to connect with these parts of the Quran in such a profound way. Right? So it's a way of connecting with the Quran for us. Let me see. I'm going to skip some slides because they're not important for us today, inshallah. Okay. So another powerful motivating factor is we know the Prophet ﷺ, this I believe is in at least two different narrations that are phrased in slightly different ways. The Prophet ﷺ said that if Allah guides one person through you, it is better for you, in according to one narration, than a whole host of red camels, in the plural. Camels, right? Not just a camel, but camels. Now, what does this tell us? What does this teach us? What were the red camels for the Arabs in 6th century Arabia? The best, absolutely. Transport, yeah. Did they have cars? Did they have trains? Did they have planes? No. They were the best means of transport. They had many other forms of transport, donkeys, etc. But the camel, the red camel, was the most prized possession. Like even today, as far as I know, in certain parts of Saudi, there are camel pageants that take place. And millions are spent on camels, buying and selling camels. It's still a hobby amongst some. So back then, imagine back then, the red camel was the most prized animal one could have. Right? You can say equivalent to the most expensive sports car today. Okay? Probably more so, because that was one of the only means of transport at the time. And the Prophet is telling us, if Allah guides one person through you, it is better for you than many red camels, a whole host of red camels. According to another narration, the Prophet says, and I'm paraphrasing, that is better for you than everything on the surface of this earth. So what we get from these narrations is the Prophet is telling us that if Allah guides one person through you, you cannot begin to imagine the reward for that. Right? Everyone has ambitions. We all have worldly ambitions. There's a certain amount of money we want to make. There's a certain job we want to have. There are certain things we want to buy, certain cars that we want to drive, a house that we want to get. If Allah guides one person through you, it is better than all of those things. All of those things. Right? And if it comes from the Prophet, it's truth. This is a fact. But the point here now is, for Allah to guide one person through us, what do we need to do? Is it going to happen when you're sitting at home, relaxing, or when you're just going about your business? No. It's going to happen when you give da'wah, when you make the effort, when you take that first step. And you take that first step with sincerity. If you can do those two things, take the first step and be sincere in that step, and then Allah blesses you with the shahada or someone comes to Islam, even if they don't, you just give the message, right? And we'll talk about this in a second. If you just deliver the message and no one accepts Islam with you for the next 5 years, you're still going to be getting immense rewards, right? It's not about the numbers. Who can give me an example of why it's not about the numbers? Nuh alayhi salam, yeah. That comes from Allah, yeah. Yeah. How many years did Nuh alayhi salam give dawah for? 950 years. How is his dawah better, or can our dawah be better? His dawah, he's the Prophet of Allah. Allah's directly guiding him. 950 years, how many people became Muslim, accepted his message? Some scholars say 70, but essentially you can count them on your fingers, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Does that mean Nuh alayhi salam was successful or unsuccessful in his mission? He was successful. So if he was successful and He had very few shahadas based on how long he gave da'wah for. What does that tell us? That the success in da'wah is not about numbers. It's not a numbers game, right? If you have loads of shahadas and if you have few, it doesn't matter. There is no direct correlation between the two. It doesn't mean if someone has loads of shahadas, that they're doing great da'wah. Or if someone has very few shahadas, that they're doing terrible da'wah. No, there's no such correlation, right? The da'wah is about sincerely delivering the message for the sake of Allah. That's all our job is. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran, when people weren't accepting his message, you know, are you going to kill yourself out of the fact that they're not listening to you? His job, as is outlined clearly, was to just deliver the message with clarity. Right? That's it. Who comes, accepts Islam, who doesn't, it's not in our hands, it's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's very important to keep this in mind, brothers and sisters, because if you go into the da'wah with the wrong presuppositions, then you're going to get, very quickly, you're going to become deflated and lose confidence and just lose the will to do da'wah. But if you go into it knowing the right understanding here, which is that it's just about delivering the message, the numbers don't matter, that will safeguard you and give you longevity. And it will help with sincerity as well. So when it comes to the fiqh of da'wah, what is the focus of the call? Would you say the focus of the call is? We've discussed this already, but let's summarize it again. What is the focus of the call? Yeah. The focus of the call is to call to Allah and worship. Right? That is the key. That's what we need to focus on. So the opposite of that, just to keep in mind, is that the call is not to your own culture, your imam, your race, your community, your group, your desires, your political ideologies, some aspects of Islam, i.e., you know, hijab or not eating pork, etc. Right? Now, I know it seems like a silly point, but again, a lot of people get caught up on this. When they start giving da'wah, they think it's about teaching people about specific things in Islam, or what you may have done a course on. Right? You may have studied the fiqh of fasting, and you think, okay, I need to teach them about this. Right? It's not about that. It's about talking about the fundamentals, which we're going to get to in a moment. But it's to focus on calling to Allah and His worship. Right? That is the focus. It's not to anything specific. Right? So don't get caught up on this, that you have to give them certain things and going off in certain directions. You have to focus on the core concepts, which is who is Allah, Allah exists, and that He deserves worship. Right? And there are a few other things that go along with it, inshallah, which we'll discuss. Again, to emphasize the point, the call is with basira, with clarity, with clear insight. Right? Don't talk about things that you don't know about in the da'wah. Right? When we talk about giving da'wah, when we get to the Gorab section, what you realize is that we're fundamentally focusing on some basic core concepts. Right? It's not about teaching people about the specifics in Islam. That's not our job. Right? If you look at it from the perspective of priorities, the fundamental thing is to call people to Allah, to tell them that they were created to worship Allah, to tell them then that who this message was sent through, the Prophet ﷺ, and to tell them what he was sent with, which is the Quran. These are the core things we need to focus on and clarify for non-Muslims. It's not about why we fast or why we do X or Y or Z, etc. And again, the reason I'm mentioning this will be clarified as we go along, inshallah. So our duty is to convey, not to convert. We've mentioned this already. So what are the key characteristics of the caller? The fundamental thing is sincerity. Okay, sincerity is key. If there is no sincerity, there is no reward. Right? You're just going to burn yourself out. There's no point. The most important thing when giving da'wah is sincerity, as is with anything else we do in Islam. We have to be sincere. We have to do things for the sake of Allah, not for our own sakes. Now, the reason it's important to talk about this is because when you talk about the da'wah, what is da'wah? Is it a private action or is it a public action? What would you say? So meaning, is it done in a cloth by yourself or is it something you do with other people involved? Other people involved. Even if you give da'wah to one person, you're giving da'wah to a person. And so it's always public. The da'wah is always public. And sometimes there's many people. You know, sometimes when you start giving da'wah, other brothers may want to listen to you, or sisters, the other sisters may want to listen to what you're saying. You know, they may start asking you questions, asking for advice, etc. There may be sometimes, like Speaker's Corner as an example, you may be having a discussion with someone and there's like 20, 30 people around you. So it's always public. Now, what does that mean for our sincerity? When is our sincerity more challenged? Most challenged? when we're alone in our houses at night, or when we're out in public. In public. So sincerity is going to be challenged. And also, you have to remember, shaitan is going to play a big role. Yeah. What is the job of shaitan till the day of judgment? What did he ask Allah time for? What does he want to do? Misguide. He asked for time so he can take us off the straight path. Now, when you decide to give da'wah, when you decide to step up in the path of da'wah, what are you going to do? What's your objective now? To bring people onto the straight path. So your job now is the opposite of shaitan's job. So if he has any sense, 2 minutes. Okay. If he has any sense, who is he going to go after? You or 5 other people that are just worshipping by themselves privately? Who's going to invest more time? You. He's going to want to take you out, right? And where is he going to attack you? He's going to try to attack you where it's going to hurt the most, which is your sincerity. Because he knows he messes your sincerity, you lose your reward, you lose your way. So sincerity, we have to focus on sincerity. And what we're going to do, inshallah, we're going to break now for Asr, I believe. And when we come back, we'll carry on from here, inshallah. Is there any quick questions in the last minute based on what we've covered so far? We won't give you the slide, but we have notes, detailed notes of the course. We'll give you the notes, inshallah.
And then you can share it on a PDF file. Yeah, I'll do it now.
Okay. Any other questions?
That the Dawah is like old action. Should we not say people like doing the form, following your method is a form of Dawah as well.
Yeah, but yes.
In public, doing all the things.
Yeah, that definitely is a form of dawah as well, absolutely. But the thing is, still, it's a public action. So a sister wears hijab, it's public, your sincerity can be challenged. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it to show that I'm a more powerful woman compared to others, or am I doing it for the sake of Allah? So whenever it's a public action, your sincerity is always going to be tested more than if you're alone. Yes.
What would you say the main difference between Nasir and Dawah? Is there a difference, or can you say?
Well, nasiha normally you would give to another brother or sister.
Just generally your own.
Yeah, or Islah is sometimes referred to as well. Yeah, so where you're giving, you can say dawah to Muslims, right? And there is room for that. That needs to be done, right? But it's more of a device calling them back. But dawah, as we context of today, is to non-Muslims specifically. But that's being said, everything we cover today, you can apply to Muslims as well, right? So it'll be useful both ways, inshallah. So you may have someone in your family that's a bit off track, leaning towards secularism, atheism, etc. You can the same concepts you can use to give them advice as well, inshallah. Anything else? Okay, let's break then, inshallah. So we will do